December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
At the start of the Pacific War, leaders in both Japan and the United States knew that the battle between their two countries would be fought not only on the front lines, but also in the hearts and minds of civilians and soldiers. It was imperative that they boost the morale of their own people and undermine the spirit of the enemy. This war of ideas and images would become known as the Thought War. As the Pacific War began, the United States and Japan recruited their top artistic and intellectual minds from the realms of advertising, motion pictures, and print media to create a wide variety of propaganda programs. Though propaganda had been employed in earlier wars, propaganda in World War II reached new levels of sophistication and manipulation.
Let's all back the attack. Let's stand by the ones who are manning the guns and pushing the foe on back.
U.S. domestic propaganda influenced all aspects of daily American life. Radio broadcasts reminded the listener to buy war bonds. Newspapers and magazines featured fear-based information on the devious nature of our enemies. Still, the most famous U.S. domestic propaganda campaigns came in the form of posters and focused on several key themes. Avenge Pearl Harbor, like the Alamo cry of an earlier era, was designed to keep the American public's anger alive and to remind them why they needed to continue fighting. Keep 'em firing cautioned civilian workers to avoid the sins of waste, hoarding, and poor work performance. Someone Talked warned Americans against divulging sensitive information because the enemy could be listening at any time.
I just learned a secret. It's a honey. It's a pip. But the enemy is listening, so I'll never let it slip. 'Cause when I learn a secret, boy, I zipper up my lip. Hello, Ma. I got a secret. I can only drop a tip. Don't breathe a word to no one, but I'm going on a trip. Shh. Don't breathe a word to no one, but he's going on a trip.
At the local cinemas, newsreels showed the heroic deeds of the average GI and touted the great battles he won with the aid of wise officers. However, what was not said was often as telling as what was. Accounts of U.S. strategic blunders and ugly defeats were mostly suppressed, and the harsh, often gory details of the battlefield were glossed over. The Japanese domestic propaganda machine faced an even greater challenge than its American counterpart, as it was aimed not only at Japanese citizens, but also those living under Japanese rule in nearby Asian countries. The challenge was to convince the people of these conquered nations that they were better off with Japan than with the Allies. In order to promote voluntary participation in a costly war effort, Japan fostered the idea of an Asia for Asians. They used phrases like the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, instead of referring to the conquered lands as part of an expanded Japanese empire. The Japanese portrayed themselves as a compassionate force, uniting Asia against the evil of Western colonization. Japan also fostered outright hatred of the American enemy, encouraging the desecration of the U.S.'s most beloved symbols and icons. For its part, the U.S. portrayed the Japanese in equally unflattering ways. Political cartoons, posters, and films portrayed the average Japanese as sinister, ugly, and dangerous.
Extend horrible empire. Take California, South America, Brooklyn, Europe. Take whole world.
While spreading domestic propaganda to one's own population was challenging enough, changing the hearts and minds of the enemy naturally proved more difficult. Because shortwave radios had been banned in Japan since 1932, the Allies were unable to broadcast radio messages to Japanese soldiers. As a result, the Allies were forced to take a more hands-on approach by dropping leaflets from aircraft directly over Japanese-occupied territories. These messages from above urged soldiers to surrender and told them that the true state of the war was far more dire than they were being told. They warned of impending bombing raids and promised fair treatment for those who surrendered. To counter the American influence, Japanese propagandists knew Allied servicemen had access to shortwave radios and were listening. They created slickly produced programs such as 0 Hour, which mixed popular American music with commentary from a host of women with seductive voices, collectively known as Tokyo Rose.
Hello, Yankee brothers. This is your Japanese sister, the voice of truth.
In daily broadcasts, Tokyo Rose played on the fears and desires of Allied soldiers, questioning why they fought and died in foreign lands, while their families and girlfriends were far away.
I am filled with sadness for you, because of the thousands of Japanese soldiers safe in caves and pillboxes your bombs and shells can't touch.
The Japanese also put out disinformation on Allied losses and troop movements to throw the Allied soldiers off guard and further erode their morale. A highly effective technique employed by the Japanese was to intersperse unscheduled messages from Allied prisoners of war throughout their broadcast. Families of captured servicemen often listened to entire days of programming in hopes of catching the voice of a loved one. This, too, ensured the Japanese propaganda messages were heard. As the tide of the war eventually turned against them, the Japanese aimed their propaganda machine directly at their own people and began deceiving them, obscuring Japanese losses and exaggerating those of the Allies. Crushing defeats, such as the Battle of Midway, were covered up and retold to the Empire's subjects as stunning victories. With the fall of Saipan and the commencement of intense Allied bombing raids on the mainland, Japanese propaganda took on an apocalyptic tone, emphasizing the depraved, inhuman nature of the Allied enemy and urging citizens to prepare for a suicidal fight to the death rather than accept defeat. During the war, propaganda proved to be a valuable tool for the desperate and victors alike. Equally, both Japan and the United States used any means necessary to vilify one another in an attempt to rally support behind their cause. As a testament of its prior effectiveness, today, nearly every nation has an agency devoted to propaganda. While it is the objective of these agencies to educate the public, they exist in not teaching us how to think, but moreover, what to think. Simply, this remains the agenda behind a different kind of war, a battle for our hearts and minds, otherwise known as the Thought War.